so enviable task of being the first speaker immediately after lunch. But I would like to use this opportunity to first thank the organizers for giving us the opportunity to share some information from the ASEAN Secretariat. Although I have to admit that it feels a bit intimidating. I feel like I'm back in law school in front of my law professors. I hope that the information that we will share this afternoon will be useful to all of us in our discussion. Alright, as was said by the chair, the 25 minutes that we were given will be divided and shared with the lovely Ms. Supavanich, my colleague from ASEAN Secretariat. And it is our hope that after this presentation, we would have achieved three things. One is that we would have looked at the ASCC and AEC landscapes. It doesn't have to be a full detailed account, but just a snapshot for us to be, have enough basis to reflect on the opportunities and challenges. Second, we hope that we would also look into the tangents. These areas common to ASCC and AEC, such as key areas of poverty eradication, education, labor, among others. And the third area is we would hope that by the end of the presentation, we would have looked at ASEAN initiatives and mechanisms that propel a more integrated approach and coherence between ASCC and AEC. So I think that's about half a minute already, so let's get started. Here we have a snapshot of the ASCC. As you can see, the literacy rate is more than 90%. Net enrollment rate for children in primary school age rose from 92% in 1996 to 94% in 2012. Maternal mortality rate per 1,000 live births decreased. And also the percentage of people living in less than $1.25 a day is from 1 in 2 persons to 1 in 8 persons. We can also see that the proportion of seats held by women in parliaments rose from 12% in the year 2000 to 18.5% in 2012. And also the proportion of urban population living in slums somehow decreased from 40% in the year 2000 to 31% in 2012. Later on, we will delve into the details of these figures. And these figures you can also access in ASEAN.org, the website of ASEAN. Now, the key questions, just to jumpstart our reflections, is given that landscape of the ASEAN Socio-Cultural Community, what would be the opportunities that we can bring from this? And also, what are the challenges that, that we will need to address and mitigate? As I've said earlier, we're not only going to look at the ASCC landscape, we're also going to look at the AEC landscape. And just to advertise, our colleagues from the AEC just published this very lovely report called the ASEAN Integration Report, also accessible in the ASEAN.org website. It details the impacts of ASEAN integration based on the 4 pillars of the ASEAN Economic Community. And some of the figures that I'm about to present were culled from that study. So here, and I think some of this data were already presented earlier, ASEAN, as of 2014, is the 7th largest economy in the world, with a combined GDP of almost 2.6 trillion as of 2014. And the average GDP per capita grew by almost 80%. ASEAN represents the world's 3rd largest market. Because right now, I think we're about 622 of us, 622 million, over 622 million ASEAN nationals in the region. And more than half of that is people under the age of 30. So we have a very young population. This demography will offer opportunities for companies that want to tap into the dynamic market of eager, young, and new consumers. Also, ASEAN is a key destination for foreign direct investments, which has reached around 136.2 billion in 2014, or about 11% of the global FDI inflow. Now, what's more interesting, and I think this was mentioned already this morning, that SMEs, small medium enterprises, form the backbone of the ASEAN economies. It is about between 90% and 99% of all enterprises in AMN, in the ASEAN member states. And they generate employment for over half of each of the member states. And later on, maybe we can tap that in our mind because it has implications on addressing gender issues, because mainly the presence of women are in this micro and small medium enterprises. Now, as I've said, some of the key things, my key takeaways from this ASEAN Integration Report of 2015, which I encourage you to read them. First is that ASEAN's economic performance remained resilient in 2014. So all of this data point towards this key conclusion. Although it was observed that it was a bit subdued at 4.6% compared to the 5.2% growth in the year 2013. Now, second, it is the service sector that propels this growth. The service sector share steadily increased to about 50.2% as of 2014, while the agriculture sector declined to 11%. And third, which affirms the earlier presentation, is that there is robust increased intra as well as extra trade in ASEAN. So within ASEAN and then outside ASEAN. And that gives us a glimpse of how the member states cooperate with each other in terms of trade of goods and services. But at the same time, it gives us a glimpse of how connected the ASEAN as one economy is to the global economy. If we tab that in our minds, this would have implications of building the resilience of communities to external shocks. There might come a time when global shocks happen, and as the link between ASEAN economies with the global market is more enhanced, these shocks might permeate or cascade to us in the region and to the communities. All right, now, just like what Dr. Mel said earlier, I'm also not an economist, but I will try to present some interesting data. The share of people living in extreme poverty, defined as those living on less than $1 a day, has fallen, as I've said, from 1 in 2 persons to 1 in 8 persons. However, if we take a look deeper into the data, we would see that the achievements is a bit uneven. For the first graph, we will see that the incidence of poverty is at least twice as high in rural areas compared to urban areas. There are more poor people in the urban areas as with compared with urban areas. Now, the second graph shows that while the proportion of people exposed to hunger is less today than 25 years ago, the incidence of malnutrition has not fallen as rapidly as poverty levels. Now, again, looking at the data closely, you would see that there's a slower pace in the reduction of poverty if we look at national level data. And then the region is still hosting a significant number of poor people. About 160 million people are still living on less than $2 per day. Also, the incidence of poverty is at least twice as high in rural areas compared to urban areas, as I mentioned earlier. This data, if I could just highlight, came from the report of the ASEAN Regional Assessment of MDG Achievement and Post-2015 Development Priorities, published last year, which is also available in ASEAN.org. Alright. Economic growth has indeed reduced poverty in ASEAN, but the persistent question is, has it been inclusive? And if we look at the data, again, based on this report, there's a pervasiveness of inequality. The first graph shows us that income inequality has increased in some member states. And then the second graph shows us that the share of income that belongs to the 10% poorest in the population has even fallen in some ASEAN member states. So if we This is just to give us data to reflect on later, to connect with what are the challenges in engaging the AEC, given that the premise is there is robust economic growth, lesser poverty, but as we dive into the details, we see this kind of data. Next one is access to primary level education. And this I think ASEAN can be very proud of. This has always been high since the early 90s. But based on this report, access to education is just one part of education. There has to be quality of education, and then the students remaining in the schools. In the first graph, we would see that indeed there is nearly universal access in many member states. In the second graph, we would see that almost all children in some ASEAN member states not only enter but also complete their primary education. But again, looking further into the details, we see that in some member states, enrollment rates remain low. And at least there are about 3 million school-aged children in ASEAN that are not in primary schools. And then if we put on our gender lens, fewer girls than boys are enrolled in primary and secondary education. And then female youth literacy remains low compared with other countries. Now, ASEAN member states have significantly reduced health risks facing their populations, especially for children and women. Poorer countries have seen significant progress, not least due to targeted prevention programs such as vaccination programs. Graphs A and B, okay, sorry it's a bit small, but I think the organizers will give copies of the presentation later. Graphs A and B would show us that population living without an improved access to water remains high. What we see here is a comparison between, that's the lower part, population without access to improved sanitation and a population without access to an improved source of water. So this indicates that population living without an improved access to water remains high. Graph C and D points us to a comparison between rural and urban areas. More people in rural areas do not have access to improved water sources. Okay. I think this is the last slide with graphs. The rapid process of urbanization, which in itself indeed is a mark of urbanization and rapid economic growth, is also a measure of spatial inequalities, or accessing quality services in the urban areas gives us an indication of how unequal it is. Cities in Southeast Asia have expanded rapidly, and the urban populations have doubled over the past 25 years. Now, in 2013, nearly 300 million of ASEAN's population lived in cities, over which 84 million lived in cities with over 1 million inhabitants. Now, this poses a lot of challenges as we see in-country migration from rural to urban areas, and then we see impacts on available resources within these urban areas. We see a high degree of informalization, especially of women's participation in labor markets in urban areas, and that poses challenges on protecting and promoting human rights, especially, and this I would like to highlight, that rapid urbanization and increased economic integration has brought about challenges, in particular in the field of combating existing and emerging threats from organized crime related to narcotic drugs. And that lends itself to, again, if we're going to wear our gender lens, violence against women. Okay. Now, we pause here to reflect on some questions after going through, after I bombarded you with data. from the report. So, first question is, how can ASEAN ensure that socio-cultural progress grow hand in hand with economic growth? Or even when our economic growth is not soaring anymore, how can we maintain socio-cultural progress? Second is, how can ASEAN ensure that socio-cultural progress and economic growth are equitable, inclusive, and sustainable in each of the member states and in the region as a whole? And lastly, how can we raise awareness, enhance our own identity as part of this whole ASEAN community among all walks of life and at all levels? Because one persistent question is, although ASEAN economy treated as a whole is growing, but has it touched the lives of the individual people, jalan-jalan here and there? Has it touched their lives, and do they feel that they are connected to this bigger project called ASEAN Community Building? So on that note, I now share the floor with Nut to continue the presentation.
Thank you, Miguel, and good afternoon, everyone. Without further ado, I'll just continue with the presentation because we know that we only have 10 minutes left, so we'll try to be very quick. My portion now is bringing the big picture down to maybe more like a sectoral picture. So I would like to talk about labor in specific here. What you see on the screen is the statistic from ASEAN Statistical Yearbook in 2014, and this shows the demographic landscape of ASEAN. Why is it important? It is because now, if we are going to talk about the labor sector, it is very important to maybe begin first with the demography of ASEAN. And the reason that we choose pick labor sector is one of the things to highlight here is that labor sector is so connected, so close with ASEAN economic community. It is impossible that we talk about economic growth without mentioning about labor, because labor is actually one of the mode of production in economic activity, and without labor then economic growth cannot be. So this is why we want to highlight about this information. If you can see on the slide, as Miguel mentioned, now the population of ASEAN overall is around 625. What I would like to highlight here is that if you see the population between age 20 to 54, the percentage is around 51%. And of course, this graph, this information doesn't include the person who aged from 55 until 60, which is still the active employment age. So at the moment, we have such a huge workforce to drive our economic growth. But then later on in the coming decades, of course, ASEAN is facing the phenomenon that is experienced by other regions, aging society. We see that the population growth rate is around, here we see the younger generation grow more or less like 30% each. But then when you look at the population growth in ASEAN, it ranges between 0.5 to 2%. And when we think about this small population growth, then we think ahead that in the future we are going to have big chunk of people becoming an older persons, and then we have a smaller number of people who will drive the economy. So this will give a lot of implication to ASEAN in the future. It is not only about labor shortage, it is also about labor migration. It is also about how ASEAN is going to equip its workforce to be very efficient, to be skillful, to be good enough with a small number to drive the economy. So that's really important issues. In terms of unemployment rate of people aged 15 and older, the data already vary across the country in the region. It is between 1 to 6%, which if we look we compare ASEAN to the world average, then more or less we are doing okay. But then we see one of the consistency and constant trend which Ms. Shreyashi already mentioned, that in most ASEAN member states where data is available, women represent a higher percentage when it comes to unemployment. And this is not necessarily because women engage in employment less than men, but it can be for various reasons. For example, women might engage more in non-paid work. A woman engage more in informal sector, and it's not really reported when the government collects the statistic. Or it can be just because the barrier in terms of socio-cultural norms that prevent women from entering to employment market. So if we would use the question that Miguel reflected earlier, and then we look into the labor sector, then we have a question, for example, how we can keep ASEAN workforce competitive. This is issue about skills, about productivity, and then how we also, we cannot just see the workforce of ASEAN as an economic agent. We cannot only see them just like that, but they are also the bearer of rights. They are human beings, so there are other aspects of labor that we should consider as well. We cannot talk only about competitiveness, about the AEC and so on. We also have to talk about decent and safe employment of these people, and this is what the ASEAN Socio-Cultural Community is addressing. At the same time, when we talk about protection of workers, about law enforcement, labor law enforcement, we cannot just look only to formal sector or only the priority integration sector in ASEAN, but we have to also look in informal sector, people in rural area, people in SME where most of the time the labor, the enforcement of labor law might not be fully effective. And also we have to pay attention to national workers as well as migrant workers. So there's a lot of issues, a lot of opportunity, and a lot of challenge to be addressed together by AEC and ASCC. And like what Miguel mentioned before, when the economic crisis strikes, how do we protect this workforce of ASEAN? This is the issue about social insurance, about unemployment insurance, employment service, and so on. So there's many things to think about the convergence between the two pillars. Dr. Melody mentioned before about one of the interview from the private sector in Myanmar talking about hollowing out of the small business who cannot compete. I would like to show another studies from ILO that that is focused on the perspective of employers, how they perceive regional integration and how they think that regional integration will affect the human resource of the region. So basically, this survey and also focus interview was done in 2013, and the result was that all of the enterprise that were interviewed, they are aware of the integration. Well, people talk about AEC and so on, and 46% of them claim that they fully understand what it meant by ASEAN integration, but only 30% claim that they are prepared for this integration. Very positive, they are 54%, they said that they think labor migration, irrespective of the skills of migrant worker, has positive or very positive impact to the enterprise. Then around 50%, however, they said that, well, we have a lot of school attainment statistic and record in ASEAN, but it turns out to be that they found that the secondary school graduates does not really have the skills that would be beneficial for the companies. Another survey that is done by ASEAN Business Advisory Council showed that 41% of SME said that they have limited or no knowledge about ASEAN policy initiatives. So you can see here the mixed feelings. At one point, people are very looking forward to ASEAN economic integration, but at the same time, they think that ASEAN still have shortfall in terms of awareness about AEC, shortfall in terms of skills and so on, and shortfall in terms of how to build the capacity of SMA to really reap the benefit from ASEAN. So these also present another opportunity and challenge for both AEC and ASCC to work together. This slide basically summarizes the opportunity and challenge in labor sector. Of course, we talk about ABC as a very positive force to create a lot of economic growth and opportunity in the region. But how do we make sure that this growth and opportunity are shared by everyone? Also about job creation, there's a study conducted by ILO and ADB in 2014 saying that there's a projection that by 2025 there will be 14 million new jobs in 6 ASEAN member states. But then what about the quality of job? When actually we know that 3 in 5 person around the world suffer from vulnerable employment. They don't receive enough wage, they don't receive enough protection and so on. So how do we make sure that the job created is fantastic number? Doesn't mean that people end up in vulnerable employment where the company might want to raise to the bottom, trying to lower the cost of the labor at the expense of the labor themselves. And also, another thing is about structural change of labor market. Miguel already mentioned that the share of service sector in ASEAN is increasing, now stand at 50.2%. In terms of labor market share, now service sector employed around 40.6% of ASEAN workforce. This is the highest sector because agriculture only 40%, when we used to know that ASEAN is agricultural based and so on, but it has already been overtaken by service sector. So the issue is that in light of this servicification, how do we ensure that ASEAN labor have the skills that are needed? The issue of skills mismatch is something that is suffered across the world, not just ASEAN, but it is very important for us to address this if we want our growth to continue. And it is not about continuation of growth. It is because there's an assumption that if people have better skills that are needed by the workers, it means that they stand better chance to be protected and to receive the reward that they deserve to have. And this also presents the opportunity to engage with the private sector because they are the one who know best what kind of skills that they need to keep their growth going. Another thing is about labor mobility. As we know that throughout human history, women move around the world, move within the country and beyond the country. And this is not something new for ASEAN as well. We have since long time ago people move, but then we see the change of trend in the 1980s when people start moving a lot more because economic reason, and it keeps going. And now we have around 6.8 million migrant workers that are moving within the region, and the number, as the speaker before me has mentioned, that it must be a lot more because there's a lot of unrecorded movement. So when people move, it is not about only people moving. There are other things about how they can carry the rights that are protected in their country to the other country and also be protected. There are issues about health of migrant workers. There are also issues about how their skills can be recognized when they move, and also about how the issue about social cohesion, because sometimes when people move, it tends to create friction in the country that they move. So there are a lot of challenges, but at the same time, this presents a lot of opportunities for ASEAN to work together within labor sector itself, and also between labor sector and other sector as well, and also cross pillar. So it is not like a negative perception or anything, but it just presents a lot of avenue to cooperate more. And all of this call for a very strong and inclusive, just and fair labor and social protection institutes that are very important and ingredients for ASEAN economic community to prosper and to ensure that human development also remain one, and human rights remain one of the agenda as well. And I think next Miguel is going to talk about women, right? Okay, I'll move to Miguel.
Miguel, if you can just summarize,
Yes.
because it's already 26 minutes.
26, okay, we're almost in excess of 1 minute. I have 3 slides left, And then I think Nuth has a couple more just to fulfill our promise of meeting 3 objectives. Earlier we already saw the ASCC and AEC landscape. Now the following slide just about wraps up that portion. And I think most of the messages here were already given to us during the earlier presentation. It's about women participation in the workforce and also the contribution and the observation that a lot still needs to be done. More work needs to be done to promote and enhance the economic empowerment of women in the region. This slide actually was culled from the projected gender impact of ASEAN economic integration, which is available again in ASEAN.org. Now, moving into the mechanisms, as I've said, that seek to address the challenges being brought forth by the tangents between AEC and ASCC. We have several initiatives, one of which is the regional framework and action plan to implement the ASEAN Declaration on Strengthening Social Protection. I won't go into the details, but what I want to highlight is that this is a cross-sectoral, intra-pillar endeavor of ASEAN. So there is a movement of abandoning the approach of working in silos, and there is great impetus, a compulsion, if we wish to use that word, within ASEAN for the 3 community pillars to work together. So in the area of social protection, I think around 8 sectoral bodies have come together to implement the Declaration of Social Protection. The other mechanism is on developing a strategy on gender mainstreaming, introducing the gender analysis, developing that strategy so that the 3 community pillars of ASEAN would be able to move forward from being gender neutral to wearing a gender lens and being more gender aware. And this is a concretely a common agenda between the ASEAN Committee on ASEAN Committee on Women and the ACWC. And the issue that's close to Ibu Yuyum's heart is on children. Sorry Ibu, I don't have a slide on this, but just to mention that there is an ongoing project of the ACWC baseline study to look into the participation of children in decision making. Now this is important because one of the children's issues in the region is not only child labor, it's also how children are impacted by this faster and accessible goods in the market. Are they safe to be consumed? Are the toys being bought by their parents safe to be used by their children, etc.? And also, do business firms in the region have clear policies, not only on child labor, but also on their core policies addressing child-related issues, such as their employees being able to have sufficient time to spend with their children, and similar endeavors. Okay, sorry we're a bit over time, but I think the Nuth will take it all home by presenting the ASEAN 2025 Community Vision.
No, I think please give me permission to skip this information because I think this is the document that you are very well aware of. It's the ASEAN 2025 Forging Ahead Together, which outlines the 3 blueprints. Political security blueprint, economic blueprint, and then socio-cultural blueprint. And this document is available online. It was adopted last year at the ASEAN 27 ASEAN Summit in November in Malaysia. So with the limitation of time, I will just skip everything here. Okay. This is what I want to highlight more. As Miguel said, that there are some established mechanisms for cross-sectoral and cross-pillar cooperation within ASEAN, but there are also many cooperation that is taking place on ad hoc or project basis, and they happen across the sectors of ASEAN. This slide shows you 15 ASEAN sectoral bodies and organs within the ASEAN Socio-Cultural pillar. And you can see it covers a range of issues from health to gender and women empowerment, environment, health, labor, and then information, culture, and arts, and so on. There are already a very positive trend for this sector to cooperate with each other. Let me give example for cooperation between education and labor. Skills development and skills recognition are very important for ASEAN. And ASEAN Senior Level Officials Meeting and ASEAN Education Senior Official Education Meeting already agreed that they would collaborate with each other on this issue. And also issue on gender, there's also a collaboration between labor and gender sector on how to mainstream gender policy, gender into labor policy. So many things are happening between the sector, and it is not only within the ASCC pillar. ASCC sectoral bodies and organs also contribute to the APSC and AEC as well, and there are many cooperation that is taking place. Let me highlight some of it. For example, on human rights. Of course, human rights sit under APSC, but then under ASCC we also have a commission on rights of women and children. We have committee on migrant workers, and there are already collaboration between APSC with Aisha and so on, with ACWC and ACMW, which you would know better. And also there's also the issue of good governance. Good governance is also under APSC, but under ASCC we have the sectoral body on civil service, which takes seriously the issue of good governance because they are the one who build capacity of civil service in ASEAN. This is where ASCC contribute to the APSC. Transnational crime, especially trafficking in person, no need to say it sits under senior official on transnational crimes, but a lot of sectors in ASCC contribute to the achievement, including the implementation of the new convention. There's also aspiration for ASEAN to become drug-free region, and we have senior officials on health and development that also contribute to this aspiration of APSC. Then issue of facilitating movement of skilled labor, of course, labor sector under ASCC also contribute to this one. So a lot of things are happening. Maybe it is not very well highlighted, but we are moving toward a closer cooperation between sector and between pillar. This is the conclusion slide, which will also throw another question or another way to see the connection between ASCC and other pillars. So how can we encourage cross-sectoral and cross-pillar cooperation, especially how do we institutionalize the cooperation and no longer and then kind of going away from ad hoc cooperation, which is, I mean, it's not bad, but it would be better to have something very solid kind of cooperation. And also, the second question is how can we ensure that regional commitments and initiatives are cascaded into national level? Because each ASEAN member states, of course, they have achievement, they have pride in their achievement, but then there are something at the regional level that can also help stimulate this achievement as well. So how do we make the regional commitments felt and implemented at national level? That remains one of the issues. At the same time, how can we ensure that voices from the local and national are heard at the regional level? This is not only about creating the platform for local, for civil society and so on to be heard at the regional level, but essentially it is also about how to create ASEAN awareness, ASEAN-ness, ASEAN identity, whatever you want to call it, how to make people really feel that they are part of this regional architecture, and by that they by themselves feel like, okay, I'm going to make my voice heard at for the higher level, something that really comes from them. So how can we entice this ASEAN-ness and ASEAN identity? And also, how can we engage people and stakeholders in ASEAN community building? Throughout my, I would say, short years at ASEAN Secretariat, I only served for 2 years here. I have already seen a very positive tendency that sectoral body keener to engage civil society, NGO, and so on. How do we keep these things going? I think for ASCC, it is something that is going, I would say from my humble observation, is going well. But how can we also have this thing also in AEC and APSC as well? This is something that ASEAN as an organization, as a regional inspiration, will have to think together and learn from each other good experience and learn from each other limitation and shortfall and try to improve to make ASEAN really an organization for people, the one that people can really feel. Thank you so much. Thank you.